Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favorite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU.
The Deep Dive podcast mugs are now available for purchase and are currently on sale. Just go to our merchandise page at deepdiveau.net to purchase one. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grab one for yourself or as a thoughtful gift for a fellow podcast enthusiast.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Raimy-Rose Lewis is a personal trainer, creator of the Sick of It podcast, and a disability advocate. She lives with Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or hEDS for short, and has dedicated her career to supporting others who face similar challenges. As a personal trainer and nutrition coach, she specializes in working with disabled individuals to achieve their ultimate health. Through her work, she advocates for greater inclusivity, raising awareness around the challenges of managing chronic illness in both personal and professional spaces. Raimy-Rose Lewis, welcome to the Deep Dive. Okay, so what are the best practices for starting a fitness journey safely when living with hEDS?
So with hEDS, it's a bit challenging because everyone's at like different points. I normally like to start with basic activation exercises, and those are the exercises that we mainly focus on at the beginning. So activation exercises for regular people normally designed to like help engage your muscles and prepare you for the exercises you're going to be doing. So for people with hypermobile EDS, I normally like to start kind of with those exercises. Warming up is really crucial for people with EDS. So we start there, and normally with just body weight exercises and maybe resistance bands, and then building up to things like weightlifting later on.
Okay, so how can exercise modifications help manage joint instability and pain associated with hEDS?
Yeah, so basically when you're hypermobile, your joints are unstable, and that means it's a lot harder for your body to do things than another person. So for example, just standing or walking is harder than it is for a normal person. So the reason we like to focus on strength training is that building those muscles helps stabilize the joints. So it's like a little protective layer around the joints, helping them hold in place. That way they're not kind of going everywhere, if that makes sense. That's like a very simple way to describe it.
Okay, so in what ways does hypermobility impact muscle strength and overall fitness routines?
I think with muscle strength itself, there has been some stuff that shows that having like those flexible hypermobile joints can impair like the external force that you can produce from your muscles. But I think the biggest thing for most people is like that fatigue and energy level. So as with like a lot of other chronic illnesses, it's really hard for them to get in the gym and to have the energy to actually exercise. And then along with that, also the potential pain and injury they may experience when they go in the gym. So I think that chronic fatigue and like those pains and injuries is probably the biggest thing for people.
Okay, so how can physical therapy be integrated into regular fitness programs for someone with hEDS?
Yeah, well, basically, just like I said before, so using that physical therapy and using that exercise to strengthen the muscles around the joints to improve that stability and hopefully less likely get injuries in the future. And yeah, it can also, exercise is so great for lots of chronic illnesses and lots of things, but it can also help with like managing chronic pain and everything like that. But one of the key things is providing that stability to the joints.
Okay, so what types of low impact exercises are most effective for improving fitness without risking joint injury?
Yeah, so as for normally I start with activation exercises. I think no matter where you are in your fitness journey with hypermobility, you should also always have a good warm up at the beginning. So that's good activation exercises. And I would spend longer on those than I would with a regular person. I think normally it's fine. Like people find that you get way less injury, way less pain if we are spending that time to warm up the body before going on to that kind of heavy, more intense exercise. And then I just start small. So starting at the bottom, starting at the base with those exercises and building up. So body weight, then those are good. Then going on to resistance bands and then slowly working on that weightlifting, lifting heavy, which is what is heavy to you. Because obviously building that muscle is important. So we need to weightlift and strength train. But that doesn't mean that we have to do it straight off the bat. Like we can build up to that and get the body used to those exercises and used to that weight.
Okay, so how can individuals with hEDS balance the need for flexibility without the risk of overstretching?
I mean, people with hEDS don't necessarily need like the flexibility. Like we're already pretty flexible, already too flexible. But the overstretching is a really big issue. So some people argue that we don't actually need any stretching at all at the end of the workout. If we are doing stretching, we don't really want to be doing static stretching. So that's holding like that stretch pose for a long period of time. We want to be doing more movement stretching. So it's called dynamic stretching, where we kind of move rather than just holding one position or one stretch. I always just kind of look at it as don't push yourself to the max. So when we push ourselves to the max, when we stretch as far as we can, we normally will overextend because we're hypermobile. So if you push yourself to the max and then bring it back like 5-10%, you're probably in a regular range of motion for a regular person.
Okay, so what strategies can help manage chronic fatigue during workouts for those with hEDS?
So a lot of people find that as they work out, they'll get more energy. So you normally do get energy from exercise, but the problem is getting the energy in the first place to do the exercise. So one thing I really like to do is to leave cardio for the end of your workout, because building that muscle is the most important thing that we're working towards. And you can do cardio any day of the week, anytime. You don't need to be in a gym. You can go for a walk. So leaving the cardio to the end so that we save our energy for the strength and the activation exercises. And then if you have the energy, then we do the cardio at the end. Otherwise, you can do little bits of cardio throughout the rest of your week. So that's a big one, is leaving the cardio for the end, because that cardio tends to take a lot of energy from people. So you can do that on a completely different day. And I think the other thing is just being flexible with yourself, flexible with your goals, starting small. Maybe you want to do 2 days a week, but that doesn't mean you have to do the same 2 days every week. And then slowly you can build up to 3 days a week, and you can build up to maybe longer workouts or workouts that take more energy. I think just taking that time to slowly build it up, because as I said, you will find like the exercise will probably help with the energy level, but you've just got to build up to be able to do the exercise in the first place.
Okay, so how can wearable fitness technology assist in monitoring safe exercise intensity for hEDS?
I mean, there's probably like a million different ways that it can help. I have seen some new technology coming out for people with chronic illness that helps monitor their energy levels. I can't remember what it's called, but there are a lot of people with EDS who also have POTS because they're commonly linked. So for those people, the heart rate monitor particularly would be quite good. Monitoring the heart rate, keeping it in like a safe zone, making sure we're not pushing ourselves too far and kind of getting like those POTS like symptoms. But honestly, there's probably so many different ways that you can use them that I don't even know of.
Okay, so what role does proper warm up and cool down play in preventing injuries for people with hEDS?
Yeah, I think the warm ups, particularly like those activation exercises, and making sure we're taking time to warm up before we get into like any more intense or heavy exercises. And for cooling down, I think the focus is on loosening those joints because they get quite tight. So things like foam rolling, massage guns, massages, going to the physio. I normally recommend, all my clients, not just hypermobility clients, to do like foam rolling at least once a week, if not at the end of the workout, but something like foam rolling to loosen those muscles and loosen those joints that get quite tight is really good. And I would say that that is better than stretching for people with hypermobility.
Okay, so how can adaptive fitness equipment be used to enhance strength and stability in individuals with hEDS?
I mean, in so many ways, and once again, there's probably so many that even I haven't seen. But I think particularly using braces, like braces support for people with hypermobility. Some people think you shouldn't work out in them. That's not true. Because we can't fully control the way that our joints are going to move sometimes. Sometimes they're just going to overextend, they're going to overstretch. So using braces, but then there's so many other things like even lifting straps, which aren't made for people with a disability. They're made for just anyone who lift weights, but those can be so helpful for like grip strength and taking pressure off our wrists. So there's honestly so many different things. I would just find what works for you. And use that.
Okay, sounds good. So, what are the key indicators of overexertion in people living with hEDS, and how can that be managed?
I think the biggest things to look for is one, how you're feeling after the exercise, after the workout. So, how are you feeling in the next day, the next couple days? Are you finding yourself completely drained? Are you finding yourself with low energy, or do you feel the same? And then during the exercise, I think any clicking, clunking, or any pain during any of the exercises is normally kind of an indicator that you're probably going to get pain in that area later on, or you're going to be going towards an injury.
Okay, so how can community-based or group fitness programs be adapted to those people living with hEDS?
I think that, when you train to be like a group fitness instructor, you are taught to accommodate people. So I think in so many different ways, I think the biggest issue is that people don't have knowledge of it in the first place. So those instructors are probably completely capable of accommodating that and adapting those programs, but they don't know what they should be adapting or how they should be doing it. So I think that education for the instructors is kind of the big problem. I think you can absolutely do pretty much anything with EDS if your body allows it, but these instructors just don't have that knowledge on how to do that.
Okay, so what recovery techniques, for example, rest, stretching, massage, are particularly beneficial for someone living with hEDS?
Yeah, so as I said before, anything that kind of loosens the body up, because some people may still be in like that kind of flexible stage, but for most people with hEDS, you hit a point where you get tightness, and that's a lot of tightness, and it's kind of constant. So foam rolling, massage guns, physio massages, and also like the tennis ball technique, where you kind of lie or lean against the tennis ball on a wall, and use it on those different joints that are quite tight, and it just kind of gets in there to help loosen those joints off.
Okay, so how does pacing oneself during exercise sessions contribute to long-term fitness goals with hEDS?
I think conserving energy is really important, considering most of us struggle with fatigue and energy levels. As I said before, leaving cardio to the end or for another day, because that takes quite a lot of energy from us. And also not forgetting rest days. I mean, rest days are important for anyone. Rest days are when our muscles grow, but particularly for people with like any sort of fatigue issues, having those rest days, even if you have a rest day between every single workout, is very important. If we're not resting, we're just going to overexert our body, and we're just going to cause flare ups and further fatigue, and we're not going to get that energy from the exercise.
Okay, so what holistic approaches, such as combining physical activity with mindfulness or nutrition, support overall support overall well-being in living with hEDS?
There's so many different things you can do, and hEDS really does affect like nutrition and the gut and digestive system and everything in so many different ways. Particularly, I think yeah, I always like to think with nutrition for hypermobility, focusing on the basics. So, like, is your blood work okay? Like, it's quite common for us to be deficient in a lot of vitamins. Is that okay? Is your iron okay? Um, Things like potential supplements like creatine to help with like chronic fatigue. There's so many other things you can do, but I think things like combining the exercise, the things like massage, loosening joints, making sure our levels are at a good place. It's a really good like foundation to build like more health, like, and feel better.
Okay, so you've got a podcast called Sick of It Podcast. How did that get created, and what is it all about?
Yeah, so Sick of It is I say it's a life and disability podcast. So we talk about anything life and disability. So particular conditions, business, so many different things. I started that it was a couple years ago. It's been a bit like on and off sometimes because when I started it, I had a part-time job, and then the week I launched it, I got a full-time job, and then it takes a lot of work to make a podcast, as you probably know. So it's very hard. So that's why I brought on Emily as well. She's one of my co-hosts. So she creates episodes as well, and then we get like an extra insight, like extra different person who brings things to the table. But yeah, we honestly talk about anything, and we basically bring guests on like yourself and talk about anything disability.
All right, sounds really good. And one final question before we end the Deep Dive podcast for today is, in 30 seconds or less, if there's one bit of advice that you'd like to give to anybody, what would that be?
I think education is the key to pretty much everything, whether that's educating stuff that's relevant to you or educating yourself on things that aren't relevant to you so that we learn more about other people. I mean, I think that's what I mostly try to do. So I always think, listen and educate yourself.
All right. And on that note, Raimy-Rose Lewis, thank you very much for being part of the Deep Dive podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Check out the Sick of It podcast at shows.acast.com/sickofit and the Hypermobile PT website at the hypermobilept.square.site.